All right, let's get started. In this explainer, we're going to trace the very first steps of digestion. And believe me, this journey kicks off way before food ever hits your stomach. It's a super common idea, right? That all the digestive action happens in the stomach. But in reality, the critical first moves, both mechanical and chemical, happen the very moment food enters your mouth. So we're going to follow the path of one single bite of food. We'll start where it all begins, in the mouth. Then we'll get into the fascinating science of how we taste things. After that, we'll take a trip down the esophagus, and finally, we'll see what happens at that gateway to the stomach, especially when things go a little sideways. Okay, let's dive into part one. We're starting where all the magic happens, the mouth. This really is ground zero for the entire digestive process. The second food enters your mouth, two different but related things start happening at the exact same time. You've got mechanical digestion, which is just the physical act of breaking food into smaller bits. And then there's chemical digestion, which uses these little things called enzymes to start breaking down the food on a molecular level. So, that mechanical breakdown, it has a fancy name, mastication. We just call it chewing. But here's why it's so important. It's not just about making food small enough to swallow. By chewing, you're massively increasing the food's surface area, which gives all those digestive enzymes way more space to attack and do their job. And where do those enzymes come from? Well, they're delivered by your saliva. Saliva is mostly water, sure, but it's also packed with mucus to lubricate everything and a whole team of powerful enzymes that kickstart that chemical digestion. Let's meet the team. First up is Lysozyme. Think of it as security, destroying unwanted bacteria in your food and mouth. Then you have salivary amylase, which gets right to work breaking down starches. And finally, there's lingual lipase. It starts the process of fat digestion, but fun fact, it doesn't really become active until it hits the super acidic environment of the stomach. So, after all that chewing, mixing, and the first wave of chemical attack, what you have in your mouth isn't just a bite of food anymore. It's now called a bolus, a perfectly lubricated little package all ready for your tongue to send it on the next stage of its journey. But wait, before you swallow that bolus, your body does a lightning-fast sensory check. And that brings us to the science of flavor, which is this really cool combination of both taste and smell. Our taste buds are basically chemical detectors, looking for 6 main signals. Sweet tells us there are carbohydrates, for energy. Salty signals sodium, which is essential. Sour points to acids. Umami, or that savory flavor, tells us there are amino acids from protein. We can also taste fat, which signals fatty acids. And finally, bitter often acts as a built-in warning system, alerting us to things that might be poisonous. Taste isn't just about what's happening on your tongue. Not even close. The whole experience is really dominated by your sense of smell. Think about it. When you have a bad cold and your nose is all stuffed up, food tastes so bland, right? That's because most of what we think of as flavor is actually what we're smelling. And when these senses get impaired, it can have a huge impact. So let's just quickly define these terms. A complete loss of smell is called anosmia, while a partial loss is hyposmia. For taste, a total loss is ajusia, and a partial or diminished sense of taste is called hypojusia. So what can cause these issues? Well, it's a pretty long list. It can be anything from just getting older, to a head injury, infections, or even poor dental hygiene. But as we've all learned in recent years, there's one particular virus that's a major culprit. Yeah, around 40% of people with COVID-19 report losing their sense of taste or smell, and for many, it's the very first symptom they notice. For a lot of folks, it comes back, but unfortunately for some, that loss can be permanent, which can completely change their relationship with food forever. All right, this sensory check is done. It's time for that bolus to take the plunge. We're on to section 3, the journey down the esophagus. And at this point, there's no turning back. The esophagus is basically a muscular tube, about 10 inches long, that acts as a highway from your throat down to your stomach. Its one and only job is to transport that bolus safely. Now here's a cool piece of biological engineering. The entrance to your esophagus is right next door to your windpipe. To stop you from choking every time you eat, you have this amazing little flap called the epiglottis. It works just like a trapdoor. When you swallow, it snaps shut, covers your windpipe, and makes absolutely sure that food goes down the right tube. And that bolus doesn't just fall down your throat because of gravity. Oh no, its movement is actively controlled by a process called peristalsis. These are powerful, involuntary waves of muscle contractions that literally squeeze the food downwards, kind of like squeezing toothpaste from a tube. It's so effective, you could even swallow while standing on your head, though maybe don't try that at home. We are so close to the stomach. But first, we have to pass through one final, critical gateway. This brings us to our last section. What happens when that gateway doesn't work quite right and heartburn strikes? So, the esophagus has these two muscular gates, or sphincters. The one at the top, the upper esophageal sphincter, just opens up to let food in. But the real key player here is the one at the bottom, the lower esophageal sphincter, or LES. Its job is to open, let the food into the stomach, and then clamp shut really tight to keep all that stomach acid from splashing back up. Now, when that LES doesn't close properly, you get what's called gastroesophageal reflux, or GER. We usually just call it heartburn. If it happens once in a while, it's GER. But, and this is the important part, when it becomes a chronic, frequent problem, that's when it gets diagnosed as gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD. The key difference is the frequency, and GERD is serious because it can actually damage the lining of your esophagus over time. And as you can see, there are a lot of lifestyle factors that can make heartburn worse. Things like excess body fat around the middle can put pressure on the stomach. And then there are things that can relax that LES valve when you don't want it to, like alcohol, coffee, overeating, or specific foods like greasy stuff, spicy dishes, chocolate, and even peppermint. And with that, our bolus has successfully made it past the LES and into the stomach. The first leg of the journey is complete, but a whole new, chaotic world awaits it. So what happens when this carefully prepared package of food finally meets that churning, highly acidic environment below? Well, we'll find out next time.